Mr. President, I want to thank Chairman Alexander and Ranking Member Murray for their excellent leadership as stewards of this important bipartisan effort. In my conversations with parents, educators, and advocates across my state, one theme prevails. We must reform this outdated law. This bipartisan legislation before us, while not perfect, is a step in the right direction. I'm glad my language was included in the substitute to address conflict resolution and crisis intervention services in schools. It will provide support and the ability of school districts to provide suicide, trafficking, trauma, and violence prevention models. Such models will assist educators as they foster positive school climates so that students can enter school excited and ready to learn. However, I hope that we can also advance my amendment, number 2171, which would support those schools where such preventions are needed the most. My amendment will restore access and make improvement to schools and mental health support grants under an existing program in ESEA, the integration of schools and mental health systems. Unfortunately, the bill before us eliminates this program simply because of recent budget cuts. Those budget cuts have allowed for the diversion of its funding to other priorities. This program, however, I believe is more important than ever today. I'm not calling for a new or expanded funding or even a new program. The funding conversion should take place during the conversation should take place during the appropriations process. But for these purposes, we must make sure the program's authorization is not eliminated, as students across this country and students in my state critically need these integrated services, these services that help them deal with the effects of poor educational environments, as well as the effects of toxic stress and trauma. The need to address this problem is something I have heard repeatedly since becoming North Dakota Senator, and really previously in my role as North Dakota's Attorney General. Through my personal experiences with affected children, school leaders, and tribal representatives, I have focused on making sure all children have the ability to succeed and overcome obstacles associated with suicide, trauma, violence, and stress on their mental health. In May of 2015, Futures Without Voices, Without Violence, alongside of partners such as the Alliance for Excellent Education, National Education Association, and the National PTA, released a report entitled Safe, Healthy, and Ready to Learn. That detailed how unhealthy school climates, exposure to violence, and effects of trauma reduce academic success. As a result of such conditions, students with 2 or more adverse childhood experiences are more than twice as likely to repeat a grade. Students exposed to violence are at a greater risk of dropping out or having difficulty in school. Children exposed to violence score lower on tests of verbal ability and comprehension, reading and math skills, and overall achievement and standardized tests. As a member of the Indian Affairs Committee, I can attest that nowhere are adverse childhood experiences more common than in schools serving this country's Native communities and Native American tribes. The suicide rate for Native adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 34 years is 2.5 times higher than the national average. In South Dakota, from December 2014 to May of 2015, the Oglala Sioux tribe lost 9 of their young people to suicide between the ages of 12 and 24. At least 103, and I want to repeat that number, 103 attempts were made by young people aged 12 to 24, occurring just in those few months. North Dakota has had a similar experience with suicide. 5 young people, 3 teenagers and 2 25-year-olds on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation took their own lives within a 2-month period. And much like North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Alaska's suicide rate has increased dramatically in recent years, jumping 70% in 10 years, with large increases among middle and high school students. As populations have increased in the West, violent crime has similarly risen 121% in some areas. Though drug crimes, gun running, gang activity, and limited capacity of law enforcement, human trafficking has become epidemic, with 83% of all victims in the United States being American. How can we expect children to learn when they face such obstacles as these? This is an injustice. We must make sure our schools have the means to partner with health systems and provide preventative measures and family engagement models for improving school environments and mental health stress. Unfortunately, students are often the last line of defense for our country's most vulnerable students. My amendment would simply preserve a voluntary program that helps school provide children stability and the tools necessary to handle mental stress. I understand the call for federal streamlining and local flexibility. For North Dakota, strengthening local efficiency is a top priority. However, this particular program should not be part of that streamlining. This authorization is about updating a civil rights law based on helping all, even the most disadvantaged student, achieve and have access for a better future. But for many of our states, those disadvantaged students are also a federal trust responsibility. While this language would protect a grant program that's accessible to all, the services provided under this amendment targets issues epidemic to Indian country. As such, it would work to uphold the distinct trust responsibility of this government to provide educational resources to Native children. Much like the amendment from the senior senator from Montana, which the Senate adopted last week, I hope the Senate will similarly protect this program. By helping schools coordinate with wealthy professionals specializing in addressing the effects of traumatic events and mental stress, we will secure our most disadvantaged the equal opportunity that they deserve, that equal opportunity to learn and to achieve. Just for a moment, tell you a quick story. The first year I was elected, I had an opportunity to visit with a lot of North Dakota constituents who come into my office, and I remember distinctly the day that the grade school principals came to visit me. And I thought, all prepared for this meeting, that I would prepare on No Child Left Behind. I shared a lot of their concerns, and I was ready to talk about No Child Left Behind. That's not what they wanted to talk about. One principal told me a story about two young boys in third grade, I think second or third grade, who had ridden the bus that morning and beat up two little girls. And when they got to school, the principal asked them why they would ever do that. And they said, well, you understand, last night my dad beat up my mom and he went to jail and they wanted to visit their dad. How prepared is a school district to deal with that? If we do not engage the mental health community, our schools will continue to be those first responders ill-prepared to deal with the trauma of that life. We have to begin to integrate these programs, and we have to look at what is happening with trauma and stress and the effect trauma and stress have on learning and the ability to succeed. And so I understand and can completely appreciate and support the idea that we need to streamline programs. I think this is a program whose time has come. We should fund this program. That's a conversation for the Appropriations Committee. But we have to begin to emphasize the conditions to which children live in if we are going to educate all of our children equally. Mr. President, I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting this amendment. I also request that Futures Without Violence report, Safe, Healthy, and Ready to Learn, is entered into the congressional record. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.